Hello, Math 8 students. Here's Mrs. Strickler on April 1st giving you your lessons, and it's not a joke. You're really going to have to do the work, even though it's April Fool's, but that's all right. So I hope you all are doing well on this Wednesday. Today I have for you lesson 11.5 and 11.6. So right now I'm going to give you 11.5 and we'll get moving. So let's say a prayer. Father in heaven, we just thank you so much for this day and this time. I pray for my students that you would help them to focus and to learn well and not be distracted. All of these important concepts today. And I pray that you'd strengthen me and help me to be the very best teacher I can be, using words that will help them the most. Please give them success on this. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so now you also have a Chapter 10 test. So I will be emailing that to you on Thursday morning. And now I'm going to disappear and open up the projector so that you can take notes. I hope that you have a piece of paper out and you're ready to learn. So we're going to do lesson 11.5. And this is called using intercepts. We use intercepts when we're going to graph. This is a very important concept. It comes up a lot in Algebra 1, and anytime that you're graphing large amounts. The intercepts are where our graph intersects the x and the y axis. Sorry, there's some noise going on in the kitchen. We're teaching from home. So hopefully I'll talk loud enough. So the x-intercept, let's write down that definition, is the point where the line crosses the x-axis. And this is where y is 0. That's very important. So when we have a point, we're going to have a number here, whatever x is, and then the y value will be 0. All right, now you can guess then what the y-intercept is. It's the opposite of that, and that is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. And here, x is 0. So when we're looking at a point, we'll have 0 for x and some number for y. And that's how we know what they look like. So if you see a point like this, and there's a 0 here for the y, you can think to yourself, that is the x-intercept. In the same way, when we look at a point here and we have a 0 for x, we'll know that that is the y-intercept. Now, to see that on a graph, I hope you have a piece of graph paper and you're using that. We're going to be doing lots of graphing, lots of math. Let's say I have a line like this, and my line is coming through like here. I'm going to use a different color now. How about purple? Okay, so right here, that point on my line is 0, 2, and that is the y-intercept. So when you're looking at a graph, this is actually where the line crosses the y-axis. And right here would be my x-intercept. We don't talk about that too often, but when we do use it, it really comes in handy. And this would be at 3, 0. So see here how for the the y-intercept has a 0 for x, and the x-intercept has a 0 for y. All right, So now we're going to find those. So here's our first problem. Find the intercepts of the graph y equals 1/2 x minus 5. All right, usually this is how it goes. You have an equation and you don't have the graph yet. So you want to generate what the x and the y intercept is. Okay? So first I'm going to do the x-intercept. And that is going to be where y is 0. So I'm going to put 0 into the equation. That's a Q right there. QU. And solve. All right. So I have y equals 1/2 x minus 5. And I'm going to put 0 in for y. That's there. And now I'm going to solve for x. So now I want to move my 5 and my 1/2 away from the x to solve. So I've got plus 5. And now I have 5 over on this side. And what do I do to get rid of the 1/2? Well, I multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2 over 1. And I end up with, I'll put a 1 under here, 2 times 5 is 10. So now if I was going to write that as a point, I would say that it's 10, 0, because x is 10, and I know that y is 0 for the x-intercept. So that is my x-intercept right there. That's where it crosses the x-axis. All right, let's find the y-intercept. This is where x equals 0. So I'm going to put 0 into the equation and solve. Okay? Just like the last one. You know, why do we take these notes? A couple reasons. Just listening, usually you will retain very little of the material. And a lot of you are visual learners. So actually writing it down will help you to learn how to do the math. And then later, when you want to do your homework, you've got the notes to help remind you what we talked about. Okay. So here I've got y equals 1/2 x minus 5. And this time I'm going to put 0 in for x right there and solve for y. It's really not very hard. Whenever you put 0 in, that takes something away and makes it a much simpler equation. And especially when we're looking at graphs that have large numbers, using 0 can really make a difference in how hard graphing is. So here I've got 0, so y just equals 5. This term cancels out. That's nice and easy. So y is 5, so I'm going to have 0 for x, and I'm going to put 5 in here. So this is the y-intercept. And just to show you, if I was to graph it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here's my x-intercept, because that's where it crosses the x-axis. I'm just going to say that's x, int period. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be here. And here is the y-intercept right there. So if I had those 2 points and I wanted to graph the line, I could just connect them. Super easy. This is a very helpful lesson. Okay, let's do number 2. And remember, I'm going kind of fast. So if you ever want to pause the video, rewind something, look at your notes, catch up, feel free to do that. Make the video custom to your learning. So here is our second equation, and the directions are find the x and y intercepts. Okay, now this form of our equation with the 4x on that side, that's standard form. And when you're in Algebra 1, you will do a lot of problems in standard form. For now, though, we want to get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 4x, and I get y equals negative 4x plus 1. This is how the form that we're used to seeing an equation of a line in. Okay, so we just want to be able to practice doing that. And so that's important for later also. So let's find our x-intercept. And this is where we let y equal 0. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put 0 in for y. See that? No longer a y there. I have 0 there now. Negative 4x plus 1. And now I'm going to solve. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 1. And I get negative 1 equals negative 4x. And I'm going to divide by negative 4 on both sides. X equals 1/4. Okay, so I can have a fraction. That's all right. Sometimes the line doesn't cross the x-axis exactly on a whole number. All right, I can have an x-intercept with a fraction. Okay, so now for my y-intercept, this is where x equals 0. So I'm going to write this over here just for convenience. I love putting in 0 for x because that just makes that one term cancel out and I end up with 1. So my y-intercept would be 0, 1. And those are my two answers. Okay, we're going to do one more and then we're going to do some OYOs. Here's number 3. Use intercepts to graph a line. Okay, and they tell us that the x-intercept is negative 3 and the y-intercept is 2. So let's identify our points. So if we have an x-intercept of negative 3, that means that we have negative 3 for x and 0 for y. And if I have a y-intercept of 2, that means I have 2 for y and 0 for x. They're opposites. So that's very easy, just like in the last little illustration I showed you. If I have my points here, all I need is 2 points to graph a line, always. So I have negative 3, 0, and I have 0, 2. I have 2 points, and there is my graph. That's how it goes. Okay, I want you to do a couple of OYOs, practicing this. The directions are find the intercepts of each equation. and then graph. Whoop. Graph. Okay, so here's number 1. Y equals 2x minus 10. And number 2, 3x plus y equals negative 1. Okay, go ahead and pause the video, work on those 2 OIOs, and we'll be back in just a minute. I'm going to change colors. All right, so let's find our x and y intercepts. So the x-intercept is where y equals 0. So I have 0 equals 2x minus 10. I took the y out and put 0 in. And so now I'm going to solve for x. And what do I get? I hope you're checking your work. I get x equals 5. So my x-intercept is 5, 0. All right, the y-intercept, that is where x equals 0. So I'm going to write this down, and I'm going to put 0 in for x. See how I took the x out and put the 0 in there. So 2 times 0 is 0, and y equals negative 10. Don't forget, you can't drop the minus there. Be careful. There still is 0 minus 10, and 0 minus 10 is negative 10. All right, so my y-intercept is 0, negative 10. So let's go ahead and graph that. I'm going to make the little dashes smaller to save space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Add a little more. 8, 9, 10. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have, for my x-intercept, I have 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there. And the y-intercept, I have 0, negative 10. So I'm just going to graph it like that. So if you didn't get it right, please pause the video and check your work and change anything that you need to correct. Okay, let's go up here to this one. The first thing I'm going to do is get y by itself. Don't drop the negative. That's still negative there. Okay. So the x-intercept, get the hard one done first, is where y is 0. So I'm going to rewrite this with 0 as y. Add 1. I'm going extra fast because this should be review. You've probably already done it. Just checking your work. X equals negative 1/3. Okay, so I'm going to have negative 1/3, 0 for my x-intercept. And my y-intercept, I'm going to put 0 in for x. That always makes that term drop out. Now again, I'm going to write 0 minus 1. So you see, do not, please do not drop the negative. It will change everything. The graph will go in a completely different direction. So I end up with 0, negative 1. And let's see. 1/3, that's probably about right there. And then 0, negative 1. So it's very steep. And that's my answer. Okay, now we're going to go back to purple and do just a couple more problems. We need to do a word problem. So I'm going to read it to you. This should be number 4. And we'll write down the important information. Dina runs and walks with her dog on a trail that's 8 miles long. So we have Dina walks her dog, we don't have to write that, 8 miles on a trail. Okay? She can run 4 miles per hour. She runs 4 miles per hour. And she walks 2 miles per hour. Okay? Graph the equation, and they give us this. Graph 4x plus 2y equals 8, where x is the number of hours she runs. So this is hours she runs. That's x. And y is hours she walks. All right. What do the y-intercepts represent? Okay, what do the intercepts, what did I just say, represent? Okay, so let's make a graph. The first thing they want us to do is make a graph. And I'm going to do that using my y-intercepts. So and my x-intercept. So my x-intercept, I always like to write down, is where y equals 0. So that's going to help me. I'm going to put 0 in for y. What happens to that term? It disappears. 2 times 0 is 0. So I have 4x equals 8. See how nice and easy that is? And I get x equals 2. So that's my first intercept. The y-intercept is where x equals 0. Okay, so let's take our line, and I'm going to put 0 in for x, and look at that. 4 times 0 is 0, so that term drops out. So I end up with 2y equals 8, and I divide by 2, and I get y equals 4. So that intercept is, is 4, 0. 0, 4, not 4, 0. Okay, so these are the 2 points I'm going to plot. Now, it tells us that x is the number of hours she runs. So on my graph, I have x. So this direction, the horizontal direction, represents my hours of running.
Hey, Dad!
I'm taking, please, Johnny. Okay, that was my son, Johnny. All right, so then the directions tell me that the y represents the hours she walks. So hours of walking are here. Okay, so let's plot our points and see what happens. This one was, let's see, 2, 0. So 2, 0 is here. And the second one, the y-intercept, was 0, 4. So I'm going to draw my line. Okay. Now, I want you to think for a second, what do the intercepts represent? I'm going to pause for just a second. Okay, let's talk it through. So, right here at this x-intercept, how much walking is happening? At the x-intercept, there is, what's y? Y is 0. And what does y represent? Walking. So there is no walking. So what that represents is how long is she exercising when she's only running? When only running. And the answer is 2 hours. So when she's only running, there's no walking. Of course, that's going to be the quickest amount of time that she's exercising. Now let's talk about the y-intercept. Here, for the y-intercept, x is 0. So how much running is she doing at the y-intercept? X is 0. And x represent hours of running. So that is no running. She is not running at all. So the y-intercept represents only walking, no running. So how long is she exercising when she's only walking? Well, the answer is 4 hours. So that would probably be the longest she would be exercising, which is 4 hours. All right. I want you to do one OIO, graph using intercepts. And I want you to do this just one. 5x plus 3y equals 18. Okay, so go ahead and do that one. You don't have to get y by itself on this one. Okay, let's hurry up and finish this. All right, if we do the x-intercept, that means y is 0. So I'm going to put in 3 times 0. So I get 0 here. 5x plus 0. See that? Isn't that nice and easy? I love that for graphing. Even though we get a fraction, that's okay. There's our x-intercept. And then our y-intercept is when x is 0. Now I know I told you on example number 2 that you should get the y alone first. And I want you to know how to do both. So in that example, we got y alone first and then we found the intercepts. In this example, we're not getting the y alone first. So I want you to be able to work with the equation either way. So now I'm going to put 0 in for x. Whoops. And that becomes 0, so I have 3y equals 18, and y is 6. And there is our y-intercept. Okay, so I have my 2 intercepts, and I'm going to graph. Now, 18 fifths is the same as 3 3/5. So that's a little more than 3 1/2. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, and a little more than half. I'm guessing a little, estimating. That's fine. All right, so now for this one, I need to draw this a little longer. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, way up there. And I'm going to draw my line, and there we go. That's graphing using y-intercepts. Okay, that's the end of our first lesson. I will send an email with your homework, and we'll be back soon with the next lesson. See you in a little bit.